Islam Makhachev, the lightweight champion of the world, and a man who is clearly proving himself to be this era's generational talent. But despite his status as the sport's pound-for-pound king, how much do you actually know about this Dagestan-born fighter? Well, for today's video, we're going to take a dive into 10 things you didn't know about Islam. Growth into the greatest mixed martial artist on the planet was not hinted at through his humble background. He is the son of a tomato farmer and delivery driver and a mother who ran a small cafe. Burshi, his home village, has a population of about 200 people and is the very definition of a remote place to live. It's a small community of people, located 22 kilometers south of a nearby village of 2,000 people. Makhachev is without question the most famous person to ever come from this place. And the odds that any young kid from Burshi would ever achieve worldwide fame are truly astronomical. The idea of anyone bullying Islam Makhachev seems outrageous. But in that very same remote village of Burshi, the local kids picked on Islam for being from the city of Makashkala, poking fun at his weak upbringing, as opposed to the Burshi locals who were hardened by the tougher environment they were raised in. Islam was an easy target, but not for long. When he was 7 years old, he took up Taekwondo, before eventually finding his way to Sanda, where he was introduced to Abubakar Nurmagomedov, who was, of course, a cousin to the legendary Khabib, whom he later met. Safe to say, the bullies did not stick around for too much longer after this. Some fighters are so synonymous with their craft that it would be impossible to imagine the fight game without them. And given how well the sport's pound-for-pound king is doing, it's pretty clear that he chose the correct career path. But during his early life, after he had already met Khabib and spent some time training in various fighting systems, Islam actually stepped away from the fight game for 2 entire years to focus on being a soccer player, which is a pretty crazy alternate road for him to walk. Who knows? Maybe a man of his drive and athleticism would have succeeded in that too. But fortunately, after the 2 years had passed, he decided to return to fighting, putting the full weight of his effort into this path, a path that would eventually lead him to superstardom. Many great fighters end up crossing paths very early in their careers, long before they both actually reach their prime years. Anderson Silva and Yushin Okami may have shared the Octagon for a middleweight title clash in 2011, but they first met on the regional scene 5 years beforehand. In boxing, Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia had a number of amateur fights between them, before their fiery showdown in the professional game years later. For Islam, he actually had a Sambo fight with the great what-if of mixed martial arts, Zabit Magomedsharipov, years before they both eventually found mainstream success. On that night, Islam was the one to get his hand raised, and in the grand scheme of things, he ended up having the far more decorated career overall, given that Magomedsharipov decided to retire out of nowhere during his climb to the title. When Islam is not fighting off some of the greatest lightweights of his era, he likes to cool down by indulging in some extreme sports, namely riding dirt bikes in the mountains and galloping around on horseback. In fact, Islam was so enamored by this pastime that he was warned by his coaches repeatedly that he should stop putting his health at risk. But hey, that's just the nature of a guy like Islam. He clearly enjoys living life on the edge. One minute he's dealing with offensive dynamos like Charles Oliveira or Dustin Poirier, and the next minute he's getting his adrenaline from a very different source. Just because Islam transitioned over to mixed martial arts at a pivotal point in his career, it doesn't mean that he forgot the fighting system that served as his base. Makhachev's time in combat Sambo gave him a foundation to work outwardly from. But despite being in the UFC already at the time, he decided to dip back into the world of Sambo in 2016, and was so good at it that he won a gold medal in the World Championships, proving that his fighting skills were at the very elite of the elite, no matter what the rule set was. Islam's run in the UFC has been near flawless up to this point, but the thing that distinguishes his time in the sport from that of Khabib is the fact that he actually did lose a fight early on, and not on the regional level either. No, in just his second UFC outing, despite being on a 12-fight win streak, Makhachev got his chin tested badly by Adriano Martins within the opening 2 minutes of the first round. Before anyone knew what had happened, one of the most interesting prospects in the entire sport had been KO'd by a fighter who would barely make a dent in the UFC. Of course, it's important to learn these types of lessons early on, and for Makhachev, he ended up developing some of the most statistically impressive striking defense we have ever seen. And of course, he never lost another fight. Islam Makhachev is not exactly known for being the most lavish or extravagant person on the planet. Like Khabib, he carries himself pretty humbly, and it really stands as a testament to his character. But when it came to his wedding, to say that Makhachev did not spare any expense would be putting it lightly. He spent thousands upon thousands renting an entire hotel out for his family, friends, and training partners, with a guest list that reportedly numbered in the thousands. Look, if you're going to celebrate that one special day and you can afford it, money should be no object. But by any standard, Makhachev did not hold back when it came to ensuring that he put on a ceremony that would never be forgotten. Islam's career is an interesting one, because during his initial rise through the Russian regional scene, he was certainly quite capable of finishing any opponent. But like a lot of fighters who make that step up to the elite level, his stoppages weren't quite as prevalent at first when he set foot in the UFC. Obviously, losing to Martins was not a good look, but in those first 7 wins, he scored only 3 finishes, including a KO over an incredibly washed Gleison Tibau. But after sitting on the sidelines for all of 2020, something changed in Makhachev when he returned the following year. Despite catching some criticism of his talents for his tendency to drag fights out, to say that Islam turned into a bona fide killer would be an understatement. Upon returning, he scored 5 straight finishes to win the UFC title, and since doing so, the only fight he didn't score a finish in was against Alexander Volkanovski, and he head-kicked him in the opening round of their rematch. Since a year-long hiatus, Islam has scored 8 finishes in a grand total of 9 wins, 2 TKOs and 6 submissions, making him one of the most deadly finishers in the game today. If you have an Olympic-level wrestler and 2-weight UFC champion like Daniel Cormier losing his mind over your wrestling ability, you know you've crossed into elite territory. And when Islam pulled off a rare Russian tie snap in a wrestling training session, you could see that DC was highly impressed. Plus, it's not like Islam was doing it to some random scrub. Nope. This was a state champion wrestler, Chase Saldate, a guy who has competed at a high level for several years, and that just makes the feat that much more impressive. It's definitely one of the flashiest moves we've ever seen from Makhachev, and could you imagine how much of a pop this would get off of the crowd if he ever pulled one off in the UFC? When it comes to the world of wrestling, whether you're American or Russian, there are levels to this kind of thing, and Islam's success across multiple combat sports proves exactly where his levels are at. But what do you guys think of Islam Makhachev and his legacy? Is he already the greatest lightweight of all time, or does he need to do more to truly overtake his friend Khabib's insane run? If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss another video. While you are here, check out one of the great videos on the screen.